So in this tutorial, I want to talk about typography in Illustrator, how to use the type tool, characters palette, paragraph palette, character styles, pretty much go over what you can do with text in Illustrator. So I've already demonstrated a couple of very basic features, and I'm going to recap that just in case you missed it in the intros. When you grab the type tool, there are two different ways to start implementing typography in your document. You can just click once with the mouse, and it's gonna fill this temporary placeholder text, automatically highlighted. It's Lorem Ipsum, some Latin phrase, and you can just immediately just go ahead and start texting stuff here, writing just any kind of text. You can Command A to select all. Keyboard shortcuts is a Command Shift, greater than, less than symbol, so you can enlarge the text. And you can also hold down the Option key and do your left and right arrows to change the tracking. Just a couple of little keyboard shortcuts that you can actually implement within your document. You can even just go into your characters palette, and you can manually just change them all around in here within the characters palette. The second way of adding text to your artwork is by creating a text box. No different than the way you do it in a program like InDesign. You can just grab your type tool, click and drag to create whatever size text box you need. And at the width and height is going to implement that text. It's going to do that Lorem Ipsum stuff. It's going to create some just basic text filler. You can change the size. You can select all, copy, paste, paste, paste. And when you have text that's way bigger than the actual text box, you get this little icon here. This icon indicates that you have overflow copy. You can grab your selection tool. You can mouse over that exact little red box icon with the cross inside of it. You click on it, and you're going to get this little icon that's saying that you're indicating that you are carrying some overflowing text. Click anywhere in the document. If I want to put it right directly on the same line shift as the original, click and just hit the click and release the mouse, and you're creating multiple linking text boxes. The arrow indicated the direction that the copy is going. So if I come back in here and hit paste again, it'll update my text fields. So that is linking text boxes in a nutshell. When to use either methods. If you want to just generate any kind of copy, and with like a paragraph or for text formatting, I would strongly recommend using the text box. The difference between these two is, and this one here, and for example, does not contain any kind of boundaries. All I did was just paste. So it will it'll fill it all the way out to as length of the body of text it was originally, until you specifically hit the hard return key to format your text in that fashion, something that I highly don't recommend you guys doing. Reason being is because when you first generate your type, activate your type without dragging the mouse, just by clicking on anywhere in the document with the type tool, that it looks like an anchor point, but it's not an anchor point. It's just where the text begins. If I go into outline view mode, Command Y, for example, it shows up like a little X. There you go, little X right there. That is where the baseline starts. And when you center your copy, let's say that I have multiple bodies of text here. In this particular case, if I take this row and try to center it, if I go my paragraphs here, try to center it, it's going to center it from that one shift. And obviously it doesn't achieve the proper results in copy formatting or copy fitting, as if it was to have a text box, because it's got boundaries. Then it knows to center it within that space, or you want to do a left justification alignment or a right justification alignment, left justification, center, and so on and so forth. I strongly recommend using bodies of text. Now, that takes care of the regular type tool. If you're going to manipulate text and use typography, let's say that I have a header here, or I want to create something unique. Let's say that I'm just going to force is strong. Strong. I would probably just do it in the one line of text. I copy it a couple of times by holding on the Option key. Maybe I copied it too much. Maybe I'll want to do the, let's just enlarge it really quick. This is just one of the things that you can do to play around with typography in Illustrator. I'm going to use the word the. On this one, get rid of the rest. This one, I use the word force. And this one, I use the word is. And finally, the word strong. And then I can go here, maybe change this text to be bold. And I can just move around this here and maybe just bring this larger and bold. The force is strong, and then maybe even that one, bring it into a different color. Back in preview mode, of course, and you can see it. And this is how I would probably just work around and play around with some of the typography. Maybe do this one in all case, or maybe do this one in title cases. And yeah, you can play around with the typography in that sense. Here you can manipulate the tracking, make it wider, larger with the tracking over here, which is the space between multiple characters. The kerning, I always have it set to auto, or you can set it to optical. Optical, it just brings it in a little closer between the common spaces, like if you had a V and an A, for example, which is what the sample that it shows you. It doesn't always work with all different kinds of fonts. That's why I leave it as auto. I normally don't mess around with that on occasion. If you have it set to auto, it just spaces out the spacing between pairs of characters, whereas tracking, which is this one here, spaces out between multiple sets of characters. You can set it onto a negative setting, and you can go with the values beyond this, like 200 is the max that shows, but you can still set it to like 400 or 600 or whatever. But right now I'll just leave it at 0. If I have multiple lines of copy, so if I do here strong with in him, I don't know, just whatever. Doesn't matter, just for demo purposes. Here I can change the actual baseline shift, also known as the leading. Baseline is the space between, the leading is a space between baseline to baseline. The baseline is where the characters or the typography, the line that it sits on. Notice that the O and the G's always have a natural ascenders and descenders. You can just change and shift that around as you see fit, and maybe even double click on that, highlights all the text, and bring that size down a little bit more, and change the baseline. Just something that looks visually pleasing, not too disturbing. Maybe even change the font size or the thickness of the font to something. And you can mess around with typography in that sense. That's why I like to do it in like a single line versus the entire text box. So you don't, I guess the whole point of this is meaning that you don't have to always use or draw a text box in order to just do like a simple line of copy. I normally just type out the entire phrase, then I copy over multiple times and just visualize how I can, manipulate this, rotate it around, and do my typography in that sense, bring this down here, and just play around with it. I mean, the choice is yours, and manipulate copy in that sense, and check, use different colors and to create certain emphasis in your art files or your artwork, and play around with that and see what you guys can come up with. That's just one very simple, basic example of what you can do. Now, if I have a body of copy, again, there's a couple of other really cool things I want to show you. So I'm going to draw my text box here, and I'm going to just let it be regular text. Set the point size to about I don't know, like 18 or so, and do the letting to be auto. And I'm just going to copy, paste, 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 select all. And let me just change my alignment back to like a left justification. If you don't want hyphenations in the paragraph palette, which I don't have it available to me here, there's my paragraph palette. I'll just uncheck hyphenations and it will not hyphenate my words. But by default, it is set to hyphenate. Another cool thing that you can do, let's just change this back to regular sentence case text. You can also highlight certain parts of your copy, go to the type menu, change cases, and you can change it to just be uppercase. That way you don't have to retypeset the whole thing with a caps lock on, with a caps lock on, or per se, or you can actually just go back here and then change it to a sentence case, or change it to a title case, which is another popular one, which capitalized every word, you know, of important emphasis. Let's just go back here and change it back to, or you can do lowercase. So just a title case, great, whatever, doesn't matter. It's, you know, you can manipulate that as you know, depending on what you were trying to accomplish. So I'm going to copy, paste, paste. I'm going to create multiple size. There you go. So that fits my entire document, my entire body of text. But what I really wanted to show you guys is under the type menu, you can go to the area type options. And it gives you some features that is also available to you, just like in any kind of page layout programs like in InDesign. You can set it to, always check your preview size here, guys. And you can hit the auto size, it'll automatically size it to the size of the text, or it doesn't matter, you know, so that's just an option. You can set to have it multiple columns. You can have it to set to 2 columns, 3 columns, you know, and of course you'll have overflowing text. I'll just use 2 columns for now. You can also change your gutter space, which is the space between the columns. 1/4 of an inch is usually the default setting. You can set that to an 1/8 of an inch, or a 1/8 of an inch, or 1/16 of an inch or so, or 3/8 of an inch. So whatever you like. You can also set the padding around the body of text. So if I want to have some spacing around the actual text box, just to bring it in, that is done with the inset spacing. So let's say that I wanted to have a 1/8 of an inch inset space, hit the tab key to apply. So notice it creates this natural padding around my text boxes. So there's, you know, ways to format these items, just like you have in any page layout application. And again, that is located on the type menu under the area type, and it brings up the area type dialog box. So play around with some of these settings, see what you guys can come up with. You will be using this feature in your job 1 for your sleeve copy. Again, I will have a demo on that next week. So I'm just going to hit cancel to apply and just delete this. Another cool thing that you can do are called character styles. So if you have another set, like for example, another body of copy, in order to bring out the character styles palette, you have to go into the Windows menu, go down to your type, and bring out character styles. So it works the exact same way as it does in InDesign. So let's say that I'm going to have my main, excuse me, I hit the main header style. So this is going to be my main header. So I'm going to enlarge it. I'll hold down the shift key, and when I enlarge it, it's going to be, my headers will all be 36 points. They're all going to be in a bold typeface, and I'm going to say that the strokes is going to be, I'm going to have a stroke color of red. And so this is my main header. So I have it selected with my characters palette. I say new character style. So it adds my new character style, and I can give it a name. I'm going to call it main header. And it captures all the settings that I have for that typeface. So I just hit OK. And there it is. It shows up right there. So let's say that now I have, just go back and create a new regular character text. And I type header text again. I don't have to keep reapplying all those features or all those settings. I just select it, click on main header, and it applies those styles, those character styles. Or I can just click back to normal text and it just sets it back to default and work on some things that way. You can create your body of text and then just add more, duplicate it. If I double click on this, it brings back my options, and I can just go ahead and change additional features. Let's say that I don't want a red stroke, maybe I want a green stroke instead. I hit OK, and it changes my green stroke, and it does it for the entire document. So there's a bit of shortcuts to play around with. Also, another thing that I wanted to show you, so let's just go ahead and select all, copy, paste, 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 just so I can have more than just simple text on there. They're called glyphs. So under the Windows menu, go down to Type and select Glyphs. Glyphs are just special characters that you can find in these menus that are available. Now, they may be available on some font styles and some not. Let's say that if I want a $ or percent signs and specific fonts may have it, or if I'm typing in a word in a foreign language, per se, and let's say that I want to insert that specific character. So you want to have your mouse cursor or your cursor blinking in the area that you want to insert that special character. So you just find it on the glyph chart, double click on it, and it adds it to your text. It adds those special characters. There are some keyboard shortcuts that you can do on your own. For example, if you hit down the Option 2 key, it brings you your trademark symbol. If you hit the Option G key, brings you G as in Greg, brings you your copyright symbol, and I believe Option R gives you the registration mark, which are the most popular ones used in typography. And also, on the Mac, if you hold down Option number 8, it gives you a bulleted item point. So you can do those kinds of typographical formattings for your body of text, or depending on what you need. So you have the characters, glyphs. Here you have your font libraries and that you should have access to. Now again, some of these don't have special characters, or you won't be able to. It all depends on the kind of fonts that you use for your layouts. Okay, so that's the glyphs, and that just covers the main feature of the type tool. Also, this part right here, this one is called the area type tool. Now you got to have a shape or a box in order to use this. It types inside a path. You can have a photograph, and then you bring in your pen tool, and let's say that you want to outline an area to just cover that text. Let's say if I just want to cover a body of text from this perspective, let me just go ahead and change this and toggle this to a no fill stroke of black. And let's say that my body of text is going to cover within this space here. And it is all in paths, for example. So you got to have a path in order to use this tool first. It can be inside a circle, but I just decided to use the pen tool and draw this shape so that you can see what I can do with this. So I just grab my type tool. Now notice that if I go in, click on the inside portion, it's going to give me this error message. I have to click on the actual path in order for this to work. So grab my area type tool again, click on the path, and it's going to automatically fill with my text. I'm just going to click on normal character style, copy, paste, 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 so that you can see that it fills up that path. So it basically works like it does with the bounding boxes. Like if you created like a text box with the text tool. So it has the same properties. It has the exact same rules. So if I click on here, hit paste again, I'm going to have the overflowing text as well. So if I click inside that little square and grab and get my little carry in text icon, it's going to generate another path the exact same way it was drawn originally, and it's going to overflow my text. Okay, so I'm going to hit the delete key, delete that, so that I don't have overflowing text, and just delete some of this. Now, the cool thing about this, since I created this out of vector shapes, I can grab my indirect selection tool, have access to all the anchor points, and change that path on the fly, and then the text will update based on any kind of change that I do. Okay? So that's how that works. And of course, you can just create your same formattings. If this is a center text, it'll center it within that space. Hit the return key. So now I can select all. I say I want everything to be left justified except for this portion. I want it to be center justification. Then it's going to, since it has bounding boxes that are bounding areas, it'll center it within that space, enlarge my text, and it's going to update everything else around it. Now it's going to center within this given space. So it's some elements might look a little bit off, but then again, that is the aesthetics of the design. Now, if I enlarge this, it will not increase the size of my text. It'll just change the shape of my path. Unlike if I just click once with the mouse and I enlarge it, it will distort my text. So it's different than having a text box. Okay, so you can see it updating the features on my characters palette as I move around the actual type itself. I double clicked on this and I got that little message. Whereas on the bounding boxes or any shape, I change the scaling of that. It does not change the properties of my typography, only the properties of the shape. Okay. Whereas this one, it does change the properties of my typography, the overall look and feel. As notice, it just enlarged the width of my text by 72%, set it back to 100%, and so on and so forth. Okay. But if I hold down the shift key, it will scale it in proportions and change my size and everything else in proportion. Okay, so that's the different formats of doing it. Now, this one's probably my favorite one. It's the type on the path. But before I can demonstrate that, I obviously need to have a path. So I'm going to draw a path with my pen tool. Just something simple real quick, just for demo. And I'm going to change that, of course, to no fills, just a black stroke. And you have to have a path. So I'm going to grab my type tool, mouse over it. Once you see that little path, click on it, and it's going to fill it with obviously some filler text. Guys, if you don't want to see that filler text, if you just want it to blink blank, you can actually change that under your preference settings by going to Illustrator, Preferences, Type. And I think it's this part right here where it says Fill New Objects with Placeholder Text. If you uncheck that, hit OK. Then the next type text that I use, for example, if I drag, it's not going to fill it with anything, but it does create my little blinker, and then I can start typing. So you have that option, or if I click once with the mouse, it just creates my blinker. Now, so yeah, let me put that back real quick, go back to my type, and check that box again, because I personally prefer it. Sometimes, however, and I've gotten burned by this in the past, I've accidentally clicked with the type tool on a client's artwork, and it created that Lorem Ipsum text, and I didn't see it, and the file went to production, and it got printed, and a job had to be done all over again because Lorem Ipsum was hanging around one of their main characters' face, and I totally missed it. So on a professional level basis, I have it turned off because sometimes I just grab my type tool, and I just click with the mouse accidentally, didn't realize it, and of course this little guy starts hanging around randomly within your document. All right, so now let me talk about the text on the path real quick. So the left and the right lines here work like your bounding box. So the more I grab with my selection tool, the more I move this around. You gotta grab it. It shrinks the size of my bounding boxes and create the little overflow of text icon. Now it can do that in either direction. Now the cursor here centers your text within that space. Now right now I have it set to a center justification, if I'm not mistaken. Double click on it, activates my type tool. I have this set to a center justification, but if I have it set to a left justification, it's going to justify it to that left side of that bounding box. If I send it to the right side justification, it's going to justify it to the right side of that bounding box, as you see from the right here. So I'm going to go to my paragraph palette, tell it to just do a center justification just for now. Now on this line here, does the same thing. I can close it in onto the path and create a hanging text box. The center one here, you can move that, you can choose to move that bounding box along that path. I can even drag it down and my text is now upside down, and then move it along that path. I can also play with the ascending and descending of the path, which is located in your characters palette. So this is ascenders and descenders. I can actually increase my ascenders, so just have the text sit above the path line. I can have it sit below the path line. And this is how you can manipulate logos that are like on a circle, and you have the text surrounding the logo in the circle. We'll create that real quick if I have time. So that's how you can manipulate that. You can also go into the type tool, the type on the path tool, and double click on it, and you have the type on the path options. So it kind of creates these different kinds of effects. And again, I got to this by double clicking the type on the path. So I got the type on the path options. You have all these different kinds of effects. So rainbow effect is the most common one. You can also do a skew effect, which skews the text. Also click on your preview. It kind of skews the text along that path. I'm not sure. This is also one that's used a lot. All the other ones, like the 3D ribbon, the stair steps, and the gravity, we'll just click on that so you see what it looks like. It gives a whole different kind of perspective to it. I'm not so sure what kind of application can be used or something. I just think it looks a little weird. So, sky's the limit. Use your creativity for that. The stair steps are just really just, let me zoom in on this. Command, hit OK. All it does is it looks like it's literally just sitting on the baseline, stair stepping away your text. Looks a little off for me. Then the gravity looks like it's all getting pulled into a center gravity, which looks a little weird. Rainbow effect obviously is the most common one, and skew I use that a lot as well. Let's just go back to the rainbow effect. And the baseline, you can do the ascenders and descenders, and you can do the spacing here. It's like no difference than using the tracking. So I'd rather use the characters palette for that, because I have a little bit much more control over it. You can send it to the center. It centers it to the center of the actual path that you've created. And of course, it sits it back onto the baseline of your path of the text. The flip changes the orientation, no different than the way I did it manually. But this one here, you have the options to just type, and it applies your changes. I'm going to hit cancel, so I don't want any of that to be applied. And of course, I want to go back to my rainbow effect. Hit OK. And the rainbow effect obviously is the most common one that you can use for text. And yeah, so that's text on the path. So I'm going to hit 0 to delete that. And this one here is no different than just your regular type. It's just that you type it, and it's just looks like a no-tell motel. Not one of my favorites, but you can copy, paste. Now if you have a text box here, and it just looks like you can do like a bunch of ones and zeros. Select all, copy, paste, and it just looks like the matrix, I guess. So that's one way to use that feature. And the area type tool is pretty much all of this, except the text will be just stacked text. So I can have a path that I have drawn like this. It doesn't matter, just whatever. And I can have the area type tool, and it just types it and fills that space, but all in a vertical setting. So that's what this one does. This one here, it does a vertical type on the path, so I'm just going to draw a circle real quick. So I'll draw a circle here, and I have a text on the path, and so it just draws it all on the horizontal aspects that way. Okay. So then I have my type here with the touch type tool. The touch type tool is actually pretty cool. So let's get rid of this, and let me just get a regular copy, paste, just because I don't want to think about something to type. The area type tool here, I can create my selection with the area type tool. So I can just select this portion of this text, and I can manipulate it in this form and add it. I can even rotate it in that space, or I can shrink it down, and I can just pretty much do any kind of simple manipulations with just selecting only specific text within that space. Like if I do the P, and I can just change typography that way. You can also have a shortcut to it in your characters palette. I don't see anything. Maybe if you go into options, maybe it's a different version. I don't remember. But anyways, oh, and the rotate feature here. Let's say if I can take these two here. The rotate, I can rotate my text in that area. So that's what that does. There we go. And creates that kind of forms of typography. Okay. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is creating outlines of your copy versus leaving them as text. So let's say I just have my type tool now. Oh, it saved there all my features here. So just put that back to 0. So let's say I have text here. I know creative, right? And enlarge it. Maybe I'll make it bold in text. Change a different font family. Okay, so I'm going to copy this over. This one here, I'm going to create outlines by going to the type, create outlines. So it's no longer in text format. When I create outlines, I have access now to all the vector paths. There's pros and cons to this. The pro is that you don't have to supply your fonts. You can create outlines of all your copy. They're now graphic elements or vector elements, and you don't have to supply your fonts at all. The con to that is if there's a typo, and if you already created some kind of special effects to your typography, chances are you'll probably have to fix your typo and retypeset the whole thing. It's always a good idea to save a file and before you create outlines as your master file. Then you create another file, or you can have a layer that says live text, and then just turn that layer off for your printer, and or provide the fonts. Always provide the fonts when you package your artwork for printing. Then you can save your fonts, and it saves your fonts with you inside a folder called fonts. So if you see it in outline view mode, the text that's filled in, it's still in text format. Obviously, then these will have access to all the vector paths. Now, once you have access to all your vector paths, you can grab your indirect selection tool, and you can start manipulating the anchor points within that text. And you can start creating all these other cool effects that you wouldn't be able to really in, regular type format. So when you create outlines, all your text automatically are grouped. So you can just go to Object, Ungroup, and I can just say, I want this to be maybe a little smaller. Bring it in here, and then I can just take and just, play around with typography in that sense. Okay? All right, so that is typography in a nutshell here, but there's one more thing that I want to show you. Oh, let me undo this. Undo that, because I want to keep this text here. This I can remove. There's a text effect that I want to show you under the Objects menu, and that is called an envelope distort. By going to the Objects menu, and envelope distort, make with warp. So this creates all these different kinds of effects. Now that doesn't just work with just text. You can do this with any kind of vector shapes or object, okay? So what that does is it just literally just distorts your text. You can play around with some of these settings. You can change it to the different kinds of percentages. Also make sure that you have your preview mode selected. Why is this not working? Let's try a different one. Let's try with arc. There we go. There we go. My video was just a little bit lagging. And you can do like the flag sense. You can play around with some of these settings here and do that. All right. So now if you can see it in outline view mode, it just shows as plain nothingness, really. In preview mode, you can double click on this. It takes you back to the envelope edit mode or isolation mode, and you can just continue to change your text and edit your text, and the effects will still apply. Now, it will not create outlines of your copy unless you go to the Objects menu and hit the Expand feature. Expand will automatically flatten all your effects, and then you have access to all your vector shapes and objects. So now if I go to the View, Outline View mode, now I have access to all the paths. But it's no longer in text format. Now they become in vector shapes. So by expanding it, it's technically like creating outlines of your copy. And again, you can expand all the text and appearances under the Objects menu. Okay? Well, please let me know if you have any questions about this video tutorial, and I'll see you guys next time.